4 years, Prince Harry remained silent out of duty, fear, or perhaps love, but that silence has finally broken in a moment that sent shockwaves through Buckingham Palace. What he revealed was not merely personal. It was a disclosure powerful enough to challenge royal bloodlines and threaten the very foundation of King Charles's reign. This was no grand press conference or polished palace announcement. Instead, it arrived quietly, almost cruelly, through a short, carefully chosen message that appeared without warning. One post, one caption, and suddenly years of speculation felt less like rumor and more like a countdown reaching zero. Royal watchers sensed it immediately. This wasn't frustration, it was timing and intent. Within minutes, palace aides were scrambling, phones lighting up with the urgency reserved for constitutional crises. Harry's words carried weight not for what they stated outright, but for what surfaced between the lines, especially one chilling phrase: "Truth was always just one blood test away." It wasn't poetic, it was precise, landing like a calm threat. Behind closed doors, panic spread faster than protocol as advisors debated damage control and legal teams prepared for scenarios they had long feared. This wasn't an emotional outburst to be dismissed as resentment. This was far more dangerous, a man who sounded absolutely certain. Certain in a way that suggested preparation rather than impulse. Harry's resolve only deepened as leaks began to surface: messages, emails, fragments of private correspondence exchanged between him and Charles. They revealed tense conversations stripped of ceremony and warmth, where a son asked questions and a father offered no answers, allowing silence itself to become a confession. Each line carried the weight of years spent circling a truth neither man wanted to name first. Quietly, almost protectively, Meghan's presence entered the story not through a public statement, but through whispers shared among confidants. He needed to say it. He needed to stop bleeding in silence. Those words reframed everything. This was not rebellion, but survival, a man choosing truth over inheritance, identity over obedience. Even more unsettling were murmurs from someone long removed from palace life, a former trusted aide who hinted that Harry had known for years that this moment was not sudden but deliberately chosen, as though he had waited for the one moment when denial would no longer be possible. But what truth could be so powerful, so devastating, that it would drive the once loyal spare to sever every remaining tie to the crown? To understand that, one must return to a secret buried decades ago. The fairy tale had already begun to fracture behind palace doors, where Diana's tear-streaked face and trembling hands told a story no camera ever captured. On a fateful day, she whispered a name that would haunt the monarchy for generations, planting a suspicion Charles desperately tried to bury. It did not begin with scandal, but with quiet devastation, as Diana collapsed before a trusted friend and voiced what she had long feared but never dared to say aloud. "He's not his father. He never looked at him the same." Those words were not mere confessions. They were indictments against a marriage, a legacy, and the carefully preserved illusion of a royal fairy tale. Behind them lay a timeline that never quite aligned, subtle inconsistencies that sharpened doubt. Diana's medical history, Charles's erratic behavior after Harry's birth, the absence of pride where joy should have lived. These were not signs of a family at peace, but fractures in the foundation where truth had already begun to seep through. A former royal bodyguard, long dismissed and kept from the spotlight, would later recall midnight arguments, Diana's whispered pleas, and Charles's barely restrained fury always circling the same name, repeated with quiet venom behind closed doors. Behind closed doors, even the thick walls of Kensington Palace could not contain the tension, and though staff were sworn to secrecy, the palace had always been a sieve when the stakes were this high. At one point, Charles, driven by fear, pride, or perhaps both, allegedly ordered a private consultation regarding paternity, a test that could have silenced every rumor and ended years of uncertainty. Yet that test never happened. Some claim he cancelled it at the last moment. Others believe the results were obtained and quietly destroyed. Either way, the truth was not dismissed through ignorance, it was buried by choice. Even more disturbing was the later discovery of a partially redacted letter Diana sent to her personal attorney just months before her death. Large sections remain blacked out, but what survives is chilling. "If anything happens to me, let the boys know who they truly are, not just where they belong, but who they belong to." This was not paranoia, but maternal foresight written in desperation. Then there was the Queen's whispered warning to a trusted confidant, a single sentence that echoed through decades of royal secrecy: "Never dig too deep into blood. It stains." Cryptic, chilling, and unmistakably deliberate, it revealed the monarchy's true fear, not of rumors, but of what they might confirm. While the shadow of Diana's truth loomed, Charles fought to protect the throne, yet in doing so may have fractured his son's sense of self. Hidden in a locked drawer within Clarence House, palace insiders speak of a document known only to a few, neither a will nor a royal decree, but a pact, a chilling agreement forged to keep a secret buried. Harry's silence became the final clause of that unspoken contract. His birth was followed not by celebration, but calculation, unease in Charles's demeanor, tension in his voice, and whispers that refused to fade. Amid growing doubt, an alleged paternity privacy pact was drawn up, not to protect the child, but the crown. Its terms were stark. The truth of Harry's biological origins would never be pursued, publicly or privately, in exchange for preserving reputations and shielding the monarchy from scandal. But silence always has a price. Diana, wounded but perceptive, was no fool, and in return for her compliance was reportedly offered financial concessions beyond her public settlement concessions that went far beyond money alone. But it wasn't comfort that Diana received, it was control. She was granted access to key charities, influence over certain family decisions, and the illusion of autonomy, a golden cage wrapped in legal ease and veiled threats. Even more unsettling was the covert presence of MI5, not in name, but in practice. Royal staff began noticing subtle surveillance on anyone connected to Diana's medical history. A nurse mysteriously reassigned, a family doctor quietly encouraged to retire, DNA-related inquiries flagged and rerouted. No one spoke openly, but the message was clear. The monarchy was scrubbing the blood clean before it could ever be tested. Charles, still prince at the time, allegedly wielded every ounce of institutional power to block inquiries and discredit suspicion. Legal threats were issued preemptively to journalists who came too close, rumors drowned beneath favorable headlines, and palace insiders who raised concerns were dismissed or worse, silenced through quiet payoffs and character smears. Yet truth always leaves a trail. Years later, following Meghan's exit from royal life, she uncovered digital remnants in the royal archives, half-deed files, financial records, and odd non-disclosure templates that hinted at something far darker than mere PR management. She did not confront Harry immediately, unsure how, but the discovery shifted something within her, and the unraveling had begun. The most damning evidence, however, was not a file or contract, but a resignation letter from a senior royal secretary, dated just 2 months after Harry's birth. Short, but explosive in its clarity. "I will not be part of rewriting biology, no explanation, no caveats, just raw, dangerous truth." Yet pacts built on silence eventually fracture. And the first crack did not come from Charles, it came from Harry's children. Sometimes it is not scandal that shatters a legacy, but the innocence of a child. When Archie asked, innocently, why his hair, eyes, and smile did not resemble the Windsor portraits, Harry could not answer. That simple curiosity, a breakfast table question, would ignite a quiet but unstoppable royal firestorm. Still young enough to speak with brutal honesty, Archie asked the one question Harry had long buried beneath duty and restraint: "Why don't I look like them?" There was no malice, no accusation, only confusion. But for Harry, it was a dagger to the heart. That single question tore down every wall he had built around the past. It wasn't just about Archie. It was about Harry himself, the echoes of a question he had once asked in the mirror now reverberating through his son. Meghan would later confess in a private interview that it broke Harry, not with rage or sorrow, but with a helpless grief born from knowing he had passed on the same uncertainty that had haunted him his entire life. That night, sleep eluded him. Instead, he made a series of quiet calls to the few remaining friends of his mother, people who had stood by Diana in her loneliest moments, guardians of the truths buried beneath the royal facade. He was chasing ghosts, searching for fragments of answers. Days later, a weathered envelope arrived, no postmark, no sender, only a single handwritten H in Diana's unmistakable script. Inside lay a folded note and a photograph. The note read, "You may not be ready now, but when you are, this will find you." Beneath it, a candid photograph of Diana with a man Harry did not recognize. His arm was around her, their faces intimate yet closed, the date on the back chilling, exactly 9 months before Harry's birth. This was not the first time Diana had prepared something for him. Rumors had long swirled about a sealed envelope left in trust for the moment he might need it most. Harry's 35th birthday had come and gone, an occasion the palace supposedly intercepted or destroyed, though no confirmation ever surfaced. Yet the newly uncovered envelope suggested Diana had anticipated more resistance than even she could have imagined. She hadn't left breadcrumbs, she had left time bombs. Harry began to unravel, quietly, inwardly, the war between loyalty and truth, image and identity, father and son consuming him. One man had raised him with duty, another had given him life. He felt torn between two legacies, neither fully his own. Meghan watched as he drifted inward, unresponsive, shaken. Then came the most disturbing revelation. Hidden deep within Diana's old belongings, long preserved in storage, were several documents, including an unfiled DNA results request. The lab information was incomplete, the form unsigned, but it was proof that Diana had at some point sought the truth, even if fear had stopped her from pursuing it fully. Harry did not want to destroy his family, he wanted answers. So he turned to the one place where truth and betrayal coexisted: Diana's secret archive, concealed behind a false panel in a private Paris storage unit. She had left more than memories, she had left evidence labeled only for H, intended when they tried to erase you. The files included photos, personal letters, and far more dangerous items: meticulous medical documents that could shake a monarchy. The discovery was no accident. After weeks of emotional unraveling and relentless searching, Harry followed the breadcrumbs Diana had left behind, clues veiled in letters, half-truths wrapped in grief, but nothing could have prepared him for what lay behind the false panel. Tucked inside a weathered leather case were her final safeguards: neatly arranged, handwritten, raw documents, including private medical notes tracking every appointment, symptom, and detail in the months leading up to Harry's birth. At the center was an envelope sealed in wax, boldly scrolled, "Hair sample untested. Do not submit." The contents were untouched. Diana had taken a sample of her newborn son's hair and deliberately chosen not to test it. Was it fear, pressure, or her final act of defiance, keeping the truth within reach, but beyond the crown's grasp? Inside the envelope was a yellowing slip of paper with 3 simple words: "Ask James." No surname, no title, yet Harry understood immediately. James Hewitt, a name long buried beneath tabloid rumors and palace denials, a man Diana had been close to, too close, some whispered. For Harry, the implication was about more than paternity. It was about betrayal, legacy, and the fragments of a life he had never been allowed to claim. Alongside it was a slightly faded photograph, corners curled, showing Diana with a man, his arm around her waist, eyes locked in warmth and something deeper. Dated exactly 9 months before Harry's birth, the timestamp was no coincidence, it was a challenge to the official narrative. In her journal from that same week, Diana wrote, "He makes me feel real. Charles knows. He hates the way I smile when I come home." Further along, chilling diary entries described Charles's spiraling rage, accusations, and the sudden shutdown of a private lab by royal command. Diana wrote that he would rather destroy the lab than face the results. Knowing and admitting, she noted, were very different things. The final confirmation came not from the files, but from a retired lab technician Harry tracked down quietly, someone who had lived under the radar for years. The man admitted there had been royal interference. DNA samples had arrived, orders had followed, and everything was halted. No records. No results. Only silence. Armed with the truth, Harry faced a choice: bury the past as his father had, or unleash it and watch the royal world burn. It was unpolished, unrehearsed, and unsafe. In a single take, Prince Harry stared into the camera and shattered generations of royal conditioning. "This is my truth," he said, "and what follows will forever divide the monarchy, the media, and the nation." There was no palace backdrop, no media filter, just raw emotion, delivered by a man who had reached the limits of silence. For 12 minutes, he spoke not as a prince, but as a son, a father, a man unraveling the lies that had defined his very existence. His voice did not tremble, yet his pain was unmistakable, the voice of someone who had carried secrets far too long. The secrets had begun to rot inside him. Harry opened with a wound that never healed. "He was never proud of me. And now I know why." There was no ambiguity. Everyone now knew who he was naming. Charles, the man Harry had once called his rock, his king. His father, the same man who, according to Harry, had offered more duty than affection, more silence than answers. Armed with his mother's evidence, the sealed envelopes, and hidden files, Harry believed he finally understood the truth. For the first time in public, he named the man he believed to be his biological father, speaking the name slowly, deliberately, almost defiantly. The silence that followed was deafening. The monarchy had long avoided such a confrontation, but Harry threw it onto the table live and unfiltered, daring anyone to deny it. The resemblance, the timelines, the buried correspondence, this was no longer speculation. It was a claim backed by conviction. Meghan never spoke, but her presence lingered off camera. Later reports noted the quiet sound of a sob, a blurred silhouette wiping tears just beyond the frame. This was not only Harry's truth, it was theirs. A family who had tried to step away from the royal machinery, only to be dragged back into its cold, unrelenting grip. Yet even in grief, there was unity. Midway through the video, Harry delivered his sharpest blow. "I begged you for the truth. You gave me silence." The line cut through every palace denial and press-controlled rebuttal. He was not lashing out, he was documenting abandonment. A son who had asked the simplest questions and received only distance in return. The message was clear. The monarchy protected its image, not its blood. As the video neared its end, he delivered the final line with haunting calm. "The blood in my veins never bowed to your crown." It was more than a rejection, it was a severing, a declaration that lineage was not loyalty, and truth required no title to carry weight. The monarchy had once expected Harry to protect the institution. Now he was exposing the rot beneath its foundation. Consequences followed immediately. Harry's truth did not merely echo, it detonated across the monarchy, forcing Charles to respond. Within hours, Clarence House acted with icy resolve, issuing an executive decree that stunned the world. It addressed Harry's allegations and simultaneously erased his future from royal history. In the war of bloodlines, Charles chose obliteration over reconciliation. Phones buzzed, legal teams mobilized, not to verify the claims but to crush their legacy before it could take hold. Charles convened an emergency meeting behind palace gates, bringing William, Camilla, and a trusted circle of advisors. No debate, no vote, only a chilling consensus. Harry had made his choice, and now they would make theirs. That night, a royal decree was drafted under the highest classification, never to be read on television, never signed with pomp, designed to respond to Harry's revelation with the full force of the institution. It wasn't ceremonial, it was surgical. Within Charles's sealed decree lay the core of his retaliation, the immediate removal of Harry's children, Archie and Lilibet, from the official line of succession. This was no symbolic gesture. It was a legal and constitutional erasure, as if their blood had never belonged, as if they were unworthy from the start. The press, intoxicated by Harry's video, was swiftly redirected. Palace handlers, masters of crisis control, flooded tabloids with a new narrative: betrayal. Headlines screamed of disloyalty, of a prince turning on his birthright. Sympathy for Harry vanished overnight. The crown dictated public sentiment, and the media obeyed. William said nothing. His silence was not passive, it was weaponized. No word of support, no hint of doubt. His absence of response echoed louder than outrage. Loyalty, not love, ruled the House of Windsor. And when loyalty broke, consequences followed. Behind closed doors, Camilla's alleged words chilled even longtime insiders. "We warned him. He didn't listen." It wasn't anger, it was triumph, a quiet satisfaction that Harry had finally been cut loose. For years, whispers suggested Camilla never truly accepted Harry. Now she didn't need to pretend. Charles's decree was not merely punitive, it was permanent. With a single stroke, he rewrote history, exiling not just his son, but his grandchildren from royal destiny. The man Harry had once called father became judge, jury, and executioner. Yet even as the monarchy thought it could bury the chaos, another secret surfaced. An untouched envelope addressed to Harry's sons, written in Diana's unmistakable script, appeared. It was her final truth, penned to be read only when all other truths had been denied. It bypassed palace channels entirely, delivered instead by Paul Burrell, Diana's former butler, long cast into the shadows. Trembling, tearful, he entrusted the letter to the press. Inside, the words were neither legal nor royal, they were maternal, human. "No matter who your father is, you are my truth. You are my joy. They cannot take that from you, even if they try to rewrite your blood." Diana had anticipated the coming war, and she did not stop there. The letter revealed that Charles had known the truth long before the public, or even she fully admitted it to herself. "He saw it," he suspected, "and then he made me choose silence." It was both an indictment and a confession of how deeply the monarchy controlled its narrative, even at the cost of its own. The most heartbreaking lines, however, were directed not at Harry, but at William. "Please, protect your brother from the institution, not the world. The world will hurt him, yes, but the crown will erase him. Don't let them." It was not a demand. It was a mother begging her firstborn to be a shield when she no longer could. Buckingham Palace reacted immediately. The press office launched a counteroffensive, planting leaks to cast doubt on the letter's authenticity, claiming it was fabricated, unstable, irrelevant, but the handwriting, the timing, and the content were undeniable. Public reaction tore the nation in two. One side saw a son finally armed with his mother's voice. The other clung to tradition, lineage, and the desperate belief that monarchy must remain infallible, even at the cost of humanity. Protests erupted at palace gates, supporters rallied across continents, and social media overflowed with #Diana'sTruth. And yet, even as the world absorbed her words, one final twist loomed: an anonymous figure poised to step forward with a revelation capable of shaking the monarchy's very foundation, a twist Harry had never anticipated. For over 3 decades, he had remained in the shadows. But now, compelled by Harry's confession and Diana's letter, he stepped into the light. With irrefutable evidence and a haunted past, he made the claim the world had feared and Charles had denied: "I am Prince Harry's biological father." The revelation came unexpectedly, not through a press conference, not through a sensational interview, but via a spine-chilling voice note sent to an independent investigative journalist. "My name is James R., and I'm ready." Within hours, the media scrambled to identify the man. Major James Rowland, once a decorated cavalry officer, now a quiet whistleblower with decades of secrets. His story began in discretion, not fame. He had served close to the royals, particularly Diana, during the most turbulent years of her marriage, accompanying her on discreet international trips. Their bond, he claimed, deepened during moments when Diana felt abandoned emotionally and physically. For years, he stayed silent, not out of shame, but fear, knowing how others were silenced, exiled, or ruined. But after Harry's video and Diana's letter made global waves, he knew the time to speak had come. The photographic evidence was immediate and jarring. Side-by-side comparisons between Harry and Rowland, nose, brow, the exact shade of red hair, showed not resemblance but near replication. The photograph Harry had discovered in Diana's archive now had a name and a voice. As journalists cross-referenced Diana's travelogues, the timeline aligned with eerie precision. Trips to France, private weekends, gaps in palace records all suddenly made sense. Rowland did not stop with words. He submitted a DNA sample to an independent European genetics lab, outside the influence of the monarchy or UK press, and results were expected within weeks. For the first time, whispers edged toward scientific confirmation. Buckingham Palace responded with absolute silence, no denial, no statement, only a carefully curated void. Behind the scenes, Parliament convened emergency closed-door discussions over constitutional impacts, legal precedents, and succession laws. And then, just as the story seemed to climax, another thread emerged. An anonymous source claimed Diana had left one more hidden item: a recorded audio file, encrypted and protected, intended for her sons. One line from the transcript leaked: "If they ever come for him, play this." The monarchy was no longer merely shaken, it was fractured. For the first time, no one knew who would survive the fallout. Every thread led deeper into a web of lies, cover-ups, and royal desperation. As the world watched, one truth became clear: this was no longer just a story about blood. It was a war over legacy, love, and the price of silence.